Julie, she, her, lives in Cronulla on Dharawal country. She's been a birth and postpartum doula for over 35 years, so her longevity in this field of work offers us a lot of wisdom and insight. Julie has created a doula training course known as the Birth Doula Academy of Australia, which can be done both in person and online. She's also developed a childbirth and parenting education course for families to better prepare them for birth and beyond. In our conversation today, we talked about a whole range of things like the challenges of supporting people birthing in hospital, as well as financially planning for our doula businesses into the future in order to make them sustainable. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Welcome to the Whole Doula podcast. The Whole Doula podcast is a conversation space for doulas and birth workers to talk about the diverse paths that led them to birth work, as well as the diverse and unique skills, interests and offerings they bring to their birth-keeping roles. Here I dive into conversations with others who may be wondering how to bring the different aspects and experiences of their own lives into their roles as doulas in business. After all, there is more than one way to doula, and I'd love to help others see the connections between all the different parts of themselves, to see themselves as a whole doula. I am your host, Mary Giordano, doula, birth educator, counsellor and doula business mentor, and this is the Whole Doula podcast. I hope you enjoy listening. Hello, Julie.
Hello, Mary. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I've done yoga at sunrise down at the beach and
Oh, wow.
had a great morning, actually. Yeah.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Whole Doula podcast this morning. I'd love to start with just hearing firstly how you refer to yourself, if you refer to yourself as a doula or if you use a different term, and why.
Thank you, Mary. And I'm absolutely delighted that you've invited me to come on to the podcast. I think it's exciting. I love the podcasts that are available these days. There's so much sharing of awesome knowledge and information. It's so rich for everybody. The name that I refer to myself as far as being a doula or a doula trainer, depends on who I'm actually talking to. If I'm speaking to somebody who has probably never even heard of a doula before, then I'll say I'm a birth doula. And they always say, what's that?
Mm-hmm. Is that a midwife?
Yeah. And they'll often repeat, doula, what's a doula? And so sometimes I'll simply say I'm a prenatal class teacher. Mm-hmm. And I have been since the 80s. So I've been doing this for 35 years. And I teach the natural active birth classes as well as hypnobirthing. And then, so that's one business that I have. And then my other micro business is the doula training and being a doula myself. So I tend to work 7 days a week and I just love it. Yeah. I wish there were 8 days in a week.
Wow. That's okay. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. There's lots to even just to start with there. So obviously you choose to work 7 days a week because you enjoy it so much. And in fact, you'd like to have more days a week to work. That's really interesting to hear because I know a lot of people struggle to find balance between this kind of work and other life commitments, perhaps raising young children, which a lot of us are doing, or just other commitments. So it's really lovely to hear that you enjoy it so much that you'd wish that there were more time in the week to work. So you've been in this area of work for a long time, and I'm curious, did you always, so back in the 80s you started, did you say? Yeah. So, and at that time, were you referring to yourself as a doula as well, or was that term really being used?
The term hadn't really been invented yet. I think we referred to it as a second support person, or an extra support person. That tended to be the usual language back then. It hadn't come to Australia yet, and I don't really think that it certainly had come to America, of course, with Kennel and Clarke, the two researchers, but the term doula has really just skyrocketed in the last decade or 15 years. And I love that because I think having a bit of a catchy title, having something that everybody has to lean in and go, what does that mean? Creates so much more interest and intrigue. And I think that that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, as you said, the term did exist. It just wasn't part of our vernacular until perhaps the last decade. Do you find that in the last decade that question, that's been happening less and less, that people are saying, oh, what's that? Like, are more people familiar with it these days? So you're hearing that question less often?
Yes, and it's actually quite interesting. People get excited when you say, oh, I'm a doula. And they're like, oh, my God, I've just met a real doula. I've heard of this. And they get very excited. It's one of those very special, intriguing things. They're like, oh, my God, you are one.
I find that too. People are very interested, and then often they'll start to talk about their births, and I'm like, oh, I'm at a birthday party. I don't really want to talk about births right now. That's mine personally. But yeah, people do get excited, and they love to ask questions and find out more about the role of the doula. Just a little break from our conversation to let you know that I'm currently working on the Savvy Doula, an intensive business program for doulas to help you up-level your business acumen to ensure that your dream work is not just fulfilling your heart's calling, but also sustainable and financially viable for the long term. The Savvy Doula will be launching early in 2024. To express your interest, send me an email at hello@marygiordano.com.au or connect with me on Instagram at marygiordano.com.au.
And I find that I hear birth stories pretty much all day, every day. And I just had a phone call about a half an hour ago with a girl who came through my classes a couple of years ago and stayed in contact with me. And she keeps wanting to do the doula training, but I'm not ready yet. So she was picking my brains about a friend of hers that's in Queensland that's got a breech baby, and she's only got 2 weeks left to go. What should she do? So I spent some time with her on the phone. And that's my normal day. People are ringing me, emailing me, pretty much all day, every day is involved with birthing, pregnancy, babies. And it's amazing how many people just turn to me and, can I pick your brains? And yeah, of course, and I'm delighted to help. Yeah.
So people reach out to you outside of your sort of organised offerings and just casually seeking your advice and insight. It's very generous of you to offer that. It sounds like it's something that you do offer voluntarily because you enjoy providing that wisdom to others. Is that right? Or is there an exchange of some kind there? Or is it just that your sort of name's out and about and people reach out and you're happy to provide that support?
And I always have. It seems to me with women's wisdom, kindness, generosity, and opening up your heart and being very loving with people and just kind, they care about their friends, their family, and they just need help. They're trying to help somebody else. It's very much that pay it forward attitude. The more that I help other people, I hope that they'll keep me in mind when they have a pregnant friend and say, oh, you should go and see Julie, she'll help you. And I do. I just have that generosity of spirit where I just simply help anybody who turns to me where I possibly can. I help them in whatever way I possibly can.
Yeah, beautiful. I think so many of us in these caring professions, whether it's doula work or any of the other caring professions for people who are vulnerable, we obviously do have big hearts and a lot of empathy and like to support others. It's an interesting one, I think, navigating boundaries and things. It's interesting just to hear your experience there. And it sounds like you're doing that out of just goodwill, which is lovely. And obviously you have the capacity to do that. But of course, as you said, there's also an indirect knowing that the more people know about you, the more likely they will recommend you in the future. So there's also benefit in that sense. I'm wondering though, who's holding you? Because it sounds like you're holding a lot of the time and holding a lot of people. Is anyone holding you?
No. And I just got divorced last year after 42 years marriage. I'm learning to hold me. I'm learning to be strong. I didn't have a lot of support previously, and I needed to be very strong in my marriage. And I have learnt to be a very independent soul. And I'm learning to rely on myself all the time. And I have a deep feeling within me that you already have everything that you need inside you. And that if you look after yourself, you're healthy, you exercise, you eat well, and you genuinely take good care of yourself, then you can give to others without dragging energy from other people. And I just enjoy, if I do receive something from somebody else, I'm just grateful for that, and that's lovely. But otherwise, I nurture myself
Mhm.
in ways such as going for a walk on the beach and giving my dog a hug. She sat and meditated at sunrise next to me this morning. She's an enormous Groodle, so that's a
Oh.
golden retriever and a poodle, and her name's Honey, and she's just a lovely, sweet thing. So just imagine a huge teddy there. So that's what she looks like. She's 32 kilos and she's enormous. So she's my companion most days. So I have Honey, and I have a feeling that deep inside you have everything that you actually need. Subconsciously, you've gained a lot, gathered a lot throughout your life, and sitting and meditating and connecting to a higher source and taking care of myself, walking, yoga, and meditating. And I'm learning more about the soul journey and being just gently being an individual, but not necessarily being isolated or avoiding people, mixing with loads of people, talking to everybody, being friendly with everybody, and being kind and generous to everybody. Yeah, that's me.
So, as you said, you believe that the answers are within, and that's obviously that's how I work with families as well, that I'm supporting as a doula. Everyone's approach is different. That's the whole purpose of this podcast. But that's certainly the way that I work with families, is to help them understand that the answers are inside, and helping to discern between the noise and the information outside, and remembering to balance that with their own inner knowing. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm interested, the self-care practices that you're talking about, have they always been part of your work as a entrepreneur or sole business owner and operator or doula, or are they things that you've developed in more recent years?
Something that I've cultivated for a long time, self-care, self-nurturing. It's something that my grandmother and my mother passed down to me very much. I guess they would have referred to it as grooming and self-pride, but I have a tendency just to call it self-nurturing. Yeah.
So great just to hear. We all have different ways of interpreting even the same concepts, and different ways of living the same concepts as well. So thank you for that overview, Julie. So you did mention at the start that you have a couple of businesses and different areas in your business. So maybe you can just list again what the different things that you do are. So there's a birth doula, there's hypnobirthing.
Yeah, so there's a lot actually. So in the prenatal side is hypnobirthing, and I call it the mindful hypnobirth, and I'm independent with that. And then there's the transition into parental classes, which is all about active birth, natural birth. And then for those people who are having an elective cesarean, they can come into the second section of that, which is all pure baby care. So feeding, sleeping, settling. So I have day one is all pure pregnancy, labour and birthing. And then day 2 is baby care and parenting. And I worked in a hospital for 12 years, so I'm very familiar with the curriculum in the hospital. And it's interesting because it's like a mini medical course or a mini midwifery course in the hospital.
Do you mean the curriculum of the childbirth classes? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And the childbirth classes in a hospital are very much looking after the hospital needs, not looking at things from the needs of the parents. So my classes are completely different to that, and I'm looking at what the hospital is expecting, or the way that the hospital runs, but also what their needs are. And I'm able to go between the two and explain it to the pregnant couples. You'll need to know this and you'll need to be aware of that. And then the other thing that I do is, after they've had their babies, if they need assistance, then I go in home and sit with them and help them feeding, sleeping, settling, and pointing out how to read their baby's signals, how to connect with their baby, understand the little sounds, the little noises, and sometimes the big sounds that babies are making. And then on the other hand, I'm also a doula for those who come through my classes. If they, we have a connection, and they will sometimes say, "So do you still go to births, Julie?" And I say, "Yes, I do." And they, "Oh, will you come to ours?" And so that's a lovely way of meeting clients and connecting with people. And it's just beautiful, traveling the journey with them, getting to know them and their fears, their anxieties, and then helping them through those as well. I had a really interesting one last year. This mum came along to class. She rang me. We had a long phone call. Then they attended both my classes. She brought her partner, and she was booked into a private hospital in Sydney. And the private hospital is absolutely famous for doing caesarean sections. And she'd had a caesarean first time round, and she lived in a 6th floor unit first time round. So she was in dire straits after having that cesarean, and she was extremely determined this time for a VBAC, and that's why she wanted a doula. And I thought, this is interesting. She's attempting a VBAC, but going to that private hospital. I'm not sure that this is going to happen at all. During the classes, I said, have you checked this? Have you checked that, with your doctors? And she said, yes, my doctor has said, yes, you're absolutely free to do anything that you want to. And anything I've asked the doctor has said, yes, I'm more than happy for you to do all of those things.
That's a warning sign to me.
I know. At first I'm thinking nonsense. There's no way. And then I thought, do you know, I think there might be a chance there might be one good doctor at that hospital. I started to be influenced because she was, oh, yes, I'm very confident. My doctor's lovely. She's so lovely. So we get to 39 weeks, and after every visit, they would ring me and debrief to me about all their doctor visits. So at 39 weeks, and this is typically, of course, where the doctors rip the rug out from underneath women's feet, and that's what happened. So the doctor said, I'm going to do an ultrasound, did an ultrasound. Oh, dear, your amniotic fluid levels are down shockingly low. They're only measuring a 3, and any other doctor would want to take you right now, right this minute, down to theatre and do a cesarean section. But I won't. Today's Tuesday, so what I'll do is I'll leave you till Thursday, go home, pack your bag, and then we'll do a cesarean on Thursday. And then the woman burst into tears, and then the doctor, apparently, according to the woman, said, oh, yeah, I make a lot of women cry, ha, ha, ha. And they came out of the appointment, they rang me, they were so distressed. And I listened to everything and I remained professional, and I said, okay, well, you could go home and you could drink more water, you could try some soup or juice and increase your fluids, and that might boost up your amniotic fluid levels. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'm not at all sure that this is the truth. Everything has been perfectly fine. There's been no indication of this previously. I'm not sure that this is the truth at all.
About the water being low.
I didn't say anything, but at the end of the phone call, I said, do you have any questions for me? And the dad said, yes, Julie, what would you do if this was happening to you? Oh. And I said, well, go and get a second opinion. There's another hospital next door that's a public hospital. I said, it's 20 minutes past 4. You've got 10 minutes left for antenatal clinic to still be open. You can ring this number. I know the number off the top of my head. I gave it to them and I said, ring straight away. See if you can make an appointment for tomorrow and get a second opinion and have an ultrasound. And they did. And they went to the other hospital the very next day and they got measured up, and it was a level 12. And the obstetrician who did the ultrasound said, and it couldn't have been a 3 yesterday. If you want me to take you on as a Medicare patient, I will. And if you want to continue with your idea of a VBAC, yes, that's absolutely fine. Your baby's in a great position. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with the baby. And so they sacked the first obstetrician, switched to the other hospital. And the following Monday, we had a magnificent, absolutely natural birth. A beautiful little boy was born. And after he was born, she birthed in the all-fours position. And then we helped her up onto the bed and she relaxed, holding her baby, and we were all quiet. And then after about 2 or 3 minutes, she suddenly looked up and she looked at me and she went, I did it. I did it. And she said that about 6 times and we cried. It was so magnificent. It was one of those best moments ever. And she was the happiest woman in the world, the smile on her beautiful face. It was such a fantastic experience. So that was a real buzz for me last year, being able to help her rescue herself from that peril and actually still achieve what she wanted. And so, yeah, but that baby's now 1. He's just turned 1. And it's just been so lovely being part of that journey. And to be honest with you, that's the sort of thing that is so satisfying. Really being genuinely help people to that extent doesn't happen very often to that extent, but it really is very.
It was such an important life experience, absolutely. It's such a beautiful story, thank you. And it obviously speaks to a whole lot of issues that a lot of us deal with all the time. I just got off the phone with one of my clients who's on the edge of early labour at the moment. She's a VBAC mum as well, and is finding herself with, in between the rock and the hard place of having some leaking fluid and not wanting to be on the clock. And it's so hard. And, a lot of people have turned away and no longer support hospital births. And I get that. It's really hard because the fact is when we sign up to a hospital birth, and private hospital tends to be more intervention heavy than public, even as you just alluded to there in that story. Although public hospitals will also have their own parameters that they have to work in and problems that women encounter as a result of that. It's really tricky because we can't, there's only so much we can do to support people through that. And I've come over the last 5 years to be, I think the way that I talk about that these days is just a lot more transparent in the sense that if you choose to birth in the hospital, then you need to understand that there will be things that aren't aligned with your wishes, most likely. It is possible to have a completely intervention-free and normal labour and birth in hospital. We know that, but it's so unlikely. And it's important for people to know that and, not sort of setting up these expectations that, it's just like having a birth at home, because it's really not. There are so many other challenges and it's so difficult, and misinformation. And of course, we'll never know if that particular obstetrician read the numbers wrong or whatever the case may be. It may have been an innocent mistake, but it also may have just been, an effort to coerce, and we don't know. So it's so tricky for families to sort of navigate that space and not develop an us against them sort of adversity towards their care providers, but still, being grounded and trusting in their own bodies and process. So it's wonderful that we are able to support families in doing things that might seem to be quite radical, like changing care setting at 39 weeks or at the last minute. But it's so great. I think the message here is that you can do that. If something doesn't feel right, it's never too late to change. It doesn't matter how much you've invested. If it doesn't feel right now, it's not going to feel right then either. And, it's one of the most important experiences. We've got to listen to that voice.
I think what we've had in the past, our grandmother's generation and our mother's generation had complete blind faith in the medical profession. And what I'm seeing with the current young generation is that they are much more sceptical. I think they have a lot more information available and they are reading a lot more. They're not reading books, but they're reading things on the internet. They're questioning things. They're listening to each other's stories. There's so much more communication.
Mm-hmm.
And there's much more discussion around birth trauma and postnatal depression.
Mm-hmm.
And, the truth is that the leading cause of death for mothers in their first 12 months after having a baby is suicide. And that's incredibly tragic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that more and more people are becoming well aware of, that the postnatal depression rates are huge. And as our epidural rate increased, our caesarean section rate increased. And as that happened, then the academics are well aware that the postnatal depression rates increased. And then the academics have linked together that as mothers are more depressed, babies are less resilient. So they're not being taken out and socialised. They're not having a normal life because mum's depressed. And the little ones are going off to preschool and then school, and they're not interacting correctly. They're not behaving properly. So the quality of our community is in steep decline because in direct relation to the way women are treated during their pregnancy, maternity care, the lack of continuity of care. So the long-term ramifications are really quite concerning. And I think as people start linking these things together, and doulas are actually very much the glue. The doulas I see in the future are going to be incredibly important. We're already incredibly important. The way that we're able to assist women at grassroots level, one-on-one, and we're doing a massive amount of work that either midwives are extremely restrained, they're unable to give to the extent they're so hamstrung with their staffing levels being as shocking as they are. That you've got in any hospital 1 midwife to 3 labouring women, and that's on a good day.
Yeah.
And then on postnatal ward, you've got 1 midwife to 5 to 6 mothers and their babies during the day, or 1 midwife to 7 to 8 mothers and babies during the night. And that's if they've got full staff. And that's scary. That's not safe. That's not okay. And the departments of health around Australia are able to get away with it and rip brand new mothers off because who's going to complain? They can't complain. They're too busy with their young babies.
Mm.
And they don't know how to advocate for themselves, or they can't. They try and they are left neglected. They're not supported by our system. Both midwives and mothers are not supported by our current system. And there's a lack of continuity of care. That's really the key element. And by not having that continuity of care, by breaking down the relationship between mothers and midwives, and mothers who go into the hospital, if they go to a private hospital, they've never met any of the midwives ever. And the ones that they have looking after them in the delivery suite are totally different to the ones on the postnatal ward. They've got to make all brand new relationships at a time when it's so inappropriate for them to have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting how you point out, like, bridging the support for both midwives and mothers. I'm just thinking, I'm just sort of thinking in reflection on that, how we kind of promote ourselves as supporting families, but I think also it's arguable that we do support midwives with our work, and certainly we are able to provide, because even if actually in the hospitals, there's a few things. I support both hospital and home birth. I tend to do more home birth than hospital, just must be attracting that sort of person. But when I'm in hospital, the main hospitals that I visit are the Royal Women's here in Melbourne and also Sunshine, and both of those actually do have, even if it's not a continuity of care program where the woman has met the midwife prior to labour, once they're in labour, they do tend to have a midwife allocated to a woman for the entirety of her shift, which is great, of course, even though, often women go through several shifts. That's something. But even still, even though they've got that midwife spends most of their time typing notes at the computer. So they're not able to provide the same, really up close and personal sort of responsive support that we are. So it is beautiful to be able to, I suppose, bridge that divide as well. And I work with a lot of midwives who seem to be really, really receptive of that and our presence, because they see that it's really supportive for the mum, and that it facilitates them, to go about, checking boxes that they need to do and knowing that their client is being cared for. But I know that it's really difficult for a lot of midwives to just, as you said, have their hands tied. I'm not sure what the term was that you said, but having so many things that they have to do that take them away from just providing upfront and personal support. So it's obviously it's a major challenge. And as you said, the work, the impact on mums goes above and beyond birth and throughout the first year. And actually, I would argue for a lot longer than that. I'm not sure what the stats are around cause of maternal death up to at any time during motherhood. It's so much work. And, if you're on the back of a challenging or traumatic birth and starting motherhood in that way, it's such a disadvantage. Do you only support hospital births yourself, or do you support hospital and home as well?
Oh, I love home birth. I absolutely love home birth. I actually go to all hospitals, all home births, birth centre births. It doesn't really worry me. If people have asked me to come along, as long as it's not way over the other side of Sydney, then I'll certainly go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you talked about having various different areas of your business. And so I'm curious, obviously when we have it's great because we have these different income streams that make the business, scalable and also more sustainable for those who don't want to be on call all the time. So just trying to get a picture for our listeners, because you're doing a lot of other things. I'm curious, how often are you on call? Are you on call for most of the year? How many clients do you generally work with for birth support?
Well, it varies a lot, and I'm teaching a lot, and so some people decide not to have me as their doula because I am so busy, and they're like, oh no, you're teaching all day. What happens if I go into labour? It's rarely ever been a problem. Last year I went to one, I was there all night, and then I raced home, had a shower, jumped into my clothes, raced off, did a class, and then at the end of the class went back to the birth, and then later that night we had the baby. So it was fine. It was no problem. Yeah, I actually had a fantastic experience on my 50th birthday, and I wasn't on call. But on call doesn't really matter to me because I don't drink. I can just be on call 24 hours a day, any day. I don't have to change my life at all. I'm just on call when it's fine.
Mm-hmm. You can't travel though.
No, that's true. Yeah. And so on my 50th birthday, first thing in the morning, I think it was probably 7 a.m., I got a phone call from a doula, and she had been through my classes with all three of her babies, And then when she was pregnant, and then when she was a doula, she would often turn to me in an unofficial way as her mentor. So on this particular morning, she rang me. She said, Julie, I'm desperate. I need your help. I need you to back me up. And I said, oh, do you? Why? When? What? And she said, now. I need you to just come to a birth now, right now. And I said, oh, okay. So do I know these people? Yeah, I sent them to your classes. Okay, great. So they had come from Darwin, landed in Sydney, living with family. And when they told me their story, I thought, oh, it's a great big extended family in a large house. And they were planning on labouring and birthing and then going into the hospital. And, of course, because the whole family's standing around looking at her going, are you getting a contraction now? Of course, she's not going to go into proper labour. So she was stayed in pre-labour for like 2 or 3 days. Finally, they get onto the hospital and the doula is with them and had been with them for ages. And she's exhausted. She's been on deck for 48 hours. She just can't do any more. And she's got 3 kids at home and her parents are saying, come home. So she rings me out of extreme desperation. Can you come to this birth and take up the reins for me? And I said, at first I said, no, I've got a lunch booked with my mum and dad. And then I said, actually, on second thought, I can't think of anything better to do on my 50th birthday than to go and help at a labour. So I quickly threw my shoes on, grabbed my bag, took off up to the hospital, ding dong, rang the delivery suite doorbell, and the midwife who answered the door, I'd known her for decades, and she's an old friend, lovely, very old midwife. And so we're walking up the corridor and I could hear this woman screaming and yelling and frantic and out of control, hysterical. And I said to the midwife, goodness me, that's extraordinary. I said, you've really got a difficult day ahead of you here, haven't you? And she laughed and she looked at me and she said, that's yours. And I went, oh, I'm scared. So I went in and I knelt down by the bars. I turned off the lights and I placed my hand on the centre of her back and I said, it's all right, I'm here now. How about we breathe together? And luckily they'd done my hypnobirthing class and I got her into the breathing. All the noise stopped. She went into her focused breathing and then she completely relaxed. I think it was about 8 a.m. Do you know, we had the baby by about 11.
You still got to lunch?
We got to lunch, which was only sandwiches at Mum and Dad's place. But oh gosh, it was great. And so the midwife got her out of the bath. I can't remember the reason why, and said to her, lay on the bed, push. And she didn't mind. She laid on the bed on her back and she was pushing. Anyway, everything stopped. And the dad remembered that I said in the classes, if things slow down, then do nipple stimulation to accelerate the oxytocin and hurry things up. So he quickly dived on her breast, popped it in his mouth and sucked like crazy on the nipple. And I thought, oh, okay, not sure that that's on the birth plan, but never mind. It's a good idea. That'll work. And it did. It ramped up her contractions. And I just loved the look on the midwife's face, this old midwife there. And I thought to myself, that's right. You can't possibly shock a midwife. And he alternating, sucking the nipples like crazy between the right breast and the left breast. He was determined to help her avoid medical intervention. Anyway, the contractions genuinely did really strengthen up. And wow, she pushed that baby out. It was fantastic. Delivery of the placenta, no blood loss, or not excessive. Baby went straight onto the breast, which was great. The nipples were already ready. And it was just the most fabulous birth. It just slid around so quickly and they were so happy afterwards. It was fantastic. So I was delighted. I thought, well, what a great way to spend the morning of my 50th. So I went off to Mum and Dad's, sat there eating sandwiches, telling them all about the birth.
Oh, gosh, I love that. Oh, just imagining that partner, how on board and how ready he was. And I'm curious, at that time when he remembered, did he just do it or did he seek some kind of did he sort of say, is now the time to do this or should I try this? Or he just did it? He just took that at
Just did it. So he just somehow he just remembered at exactly that right moment. And he just dived on those breasts and sucked away like crazy on the nipples. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely, it was kind of hilarious. But I didn't.
He was uninhibited as well. It's so good. I love it.
Right?
Didn't ask for
Yeah.
space. He just went straight there. Yeah, so good.
It was as if it was the most natural, obvious, sensible thing to do. And it was, and it worked. And she was so receptive. They were a beautiful couple that worked together so well. And that's actually the biggest thrust of all of my work, is really helping people to be an awesome couple together. I'm a great romantic, that I just want people to be in love. I want them to fall in love with their baby. I want everything to be incredibly beautiful, and I do everything I possibly can to enhance their relationship, to really help them to feel connected, incredibly connected. And then when the baby comes out, I've already talked to them about lots of things to do with their baby, so that they're very connected to their baby. And they're not sort of starting from scratch or too raw when the baby comes out, and they fall in love with their baby as organically as they possibly can. And I just love watching that. It's so heartwarming. Spiritually for me, that's the real essence to my life. I really enjoy watching those connections and those beautiful relationships in a family starting up.
So beautiful. Thank you. So I've just got a couple of questions before we finish up, Julie. And the first one is, you're talking about how much you love your work and how rewarding it is. And I can really definitely hear that in the way that you've been sharing. What are the biggest challenges that you've come across over the course of your career as a doula and today?
I think the biggest challenges is not making money. To be honest, I've done a massive amount of volunteer work over my 3.5 decades. I've given a lot, and joined so many committees and done so much. I've also been in hospital committees where I'm the only person on the committee as the consumer representative, not being paid. And I have done a lot of that over the years. And it's not that I regret it, it's that I am now 62 years of age and very hamstrung on my financial future. And if there was one thing that I could pass on to younger doulas, it would be very careful of your financial future. You need to make sure you have superannuation, make sure that you are viable. And so I've given a massive amount to my detriment.
That's really interesting. And you've actually gone into my next question, which was any advice that you have for emerging and new doulas. So you've answered that as well. And thank you. That's a big one, and certainly fantastic advice for those emerging and new in this space, and really thinking long term about a sustainable business model. And I think diversifying your income streams can really help with that, so that it doesn't rely on you being on call all the time. So, but it's interesting to hear that even though you've diversified your income streams and do offer so many different things, nevertheless, you still find that financially you're not as secure as you'd have liked to be at this point in your career. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, and it's really great to know. In terms of the giving and the volunteering, I'm wondering, did you ever question those things, like being the only unpaid consumer on a board? Did you ever question and agitate around that, or did you just kind of grin and bear it?
I did a bit of both. It hadn't occurred to me until somebody asked me, how much are you being paid for this? And I said, nothing. And I have to pay for my own parking, and I have to pay for my own lunch. And, the parking was quite expensive in the different venues. And so I didn't receive any financial support until one of the midwifery professors sent it up, and I got $40 an hour, which of course, it covered a little bit, but other people on the same committee would have been being paid a lot more. So it was a pittance. However, to be fair, I learned a lot. I learned a lot by being on them, listening to everything, reading everything that we were given, and that helped me with my understanding of the system and reports into maternity and the politics, and listening to what everybody had to say. It was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so then we have to see whether sometimes the non-monetary gain is perhaps balancing. But at the end of the day, we need the monetary security to live in this world, unfortunately. And so if people are starting or new in this area of work and are hoping to build a business that does sustain you, it's really great to give this consideration early on in your journey, and also when you are asked to do things, being, giving consideration to your boundaries around that and what you accept and what you don't, and what your expectations are in return, if any. So yeah, thank you for sharing that uncomfortable truth. I'm sorry that that's been your reality, but it's also really great insight for those who are at the other end of their journey. So thank you so much for sharing that. Lovely chatting with you today, Julie, and just hearing about your vast experience over the past, how many, 20, 30 years?
35 after I had my first baby. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. It's amazing.
I did a year-long course for childbirth education, and it was automatic that in that was to go to births, and that's what got me started on.
Yes.
We were told in our first year, you must go to 3 births, and everybody in our course was like, oh my goodness, how hard is that going to be? And I just simply told everybody I knew, I have to go to births.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up in the first year alone going to 12 births.
Mm.
So I just loved it. And I also love the excitement. It's funny how it often is in the middle of the night. I love the excitement of throw your shoes on, grab your bag, grab an apple, grab a peanut butter sandwich, jump in the car and go.
I look forward to having the opportunity to do that one day. But at the moment I have 2 young kids, so it's not, for me, it's like, so if I'm going in the night, who's taking them to school, and, making those sort of last minute arrangements, which is a bit stressful. So yeah, so many different experiences. Thank you once again so much for your time, Julie. And I hope the listeners enjoy the conversation and the insights that you have and experience that you have to bring here. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you too, Mary. Thank you. And my best wishes for the podcast. I'm sure it'll be very interesting for everybody.
I hope so. I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Julie today. It was really insightful to me to listen to somebody who's been in this industry for 35 years and who has evolved her business in many ways over that time. It was also really interesting to hear, despite such a long career in this industry, what Julie's challenges are these days, and which we talked about towards the end of the show. So I hope you enjoyed listening as well. And I will be sharing another episode on the Whole Doula podcast in 2 weeks' time. Thanks for listening. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the Whole Doula podcast with Mary Giordano. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation today. If so, please hit subscribe and consider leaving a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. Have a beautiful day.